All right, folks. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started as we have our participants in the room now. Thank you, everyone, for making the time today to talk about our agency survival guide here, Own Your Data, Own Your Future from Resonate. I'm Jonathan Ricard. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Resonate. I've been here for just under 10 years and have overseen a significant amount of both industry change, change within our business, and certainly change in the clients we work with and what the expectations are from our agency partners. So we're going to dive in now and get started. So one of the things that I want to say is, what are we going to cover today? Today, we're going to cover perspectives from the market and particularly how we've been able to aggregate and synthesize feedback from our clients, our existing agency customers, and what we think the big trends are that are going to impact the business. And we're going to get pretty tactical and specific on some of the next steps and some of the prerequisites as we go through this today. The number one thing we're going to talk about is why owning data is everything, right? Pretty audacious starting point, but if you don't have data in the world of AI to help you differentiate, we think that's going to be a significant challenge for our partners and clients. We want to share with you what future-looking agencies are doing, right? So when we're working with agencies that are really bending the curve, how are they doing that? And really, what does it mean to go beyond AI hype? And what clients expect? Both better results and costing and for less cost. And one of the things, we've seen, and I'm sure folks on the phone are dealing with every day, is the idea that clients are already expecting you to be offering them discounts and lower rates in 27 based on your amazing adoption of AI. And it's a little bit of a challenge to already be thinking about how you're going to do less with tools that are supposed to help you do more. We're going to dive into that. As we kick this off, one of the things that I want to say is that we're existing all together in a market that's full of change and competition. And our general perspective is there's not going to be a maybe on AI-powered marketing. We're going to repeat that phrase a few times through the session today. The first reason is that everyone knows that AI is changing their businesses, right? If you are in a marketing environment today, if you're working with clients, you know that it's changing their business, you know that it's changing your business, and you also know that it's changing your competitor's business. And what we see that is obviously an increase in shrinking margins, right? Not because you're not creating more efficiency through some of the AI, but now you have a new cost in supporting tokens right now, which are heavily venture funded, but certainly there's some concern around what token cost is going to look like as you embrace more and more AI. Two, lower barriers of entry for competition, right? The ability to spin up, what seem like fully baked companies off of the back of AI platforms seems to be kind of never ending and certainly much quicker than anyone expected in prior years. The second piece is that, competitive advantage requires change. We've built markets over the years on what do we do really well. And to maintain competitive advantage, you've got to know more and take action faster on your core principles, your core capabilities. And that just means that we've got to be looking at faster, better, and more predictive solutions to understand how to drive value, right? To tell a client who are their best customers, how are you going to reach those best customers, how are you going to leverage new channels faster and better, so that you can ultimately deliver outcomes at scale, right? This is a requirement now. We're not looking for more niche, bright, shiny things, right? Clients want success across an open ecosystem, whether that's walled gardens as part of that ecosystem or our true open web ecosystem. You've got to deliver outcomes at scale across channels. And the expectation is that we're seeing more and more portability and flexibility in how we can achieve outcomes for clients, but it's definitely also being intersected by, again, the competition, the continued fragmentation, and now new systems and solutions are saying, hey, you've got to use me too, right? Whether that's OpenAI or ChatGPT or wherever it might go, we need to be able to talk through that, right? So delighted to be in an industry that's seeing change and competition, because out of this becomes both true innovation. It allows forward-looking partners and clients to win more, and it allows you to really say, how do I want my business to work in 27 and 28? Where this year is really a year, I think that we're seeing more and more practical applications from these changes showing up in our current clients, and want to share with you how that works and give you some broad themes on how you can actually do that yourself. So when we think about our vision, we're looking at this as we want to help our clients generate exponential value for their business and also for their clients, right? Resonate has built a solution set and capabilities that allow us to work directly with you to unlock value in efficiencies, unlock value in results and in outcomes, and on the expectation that you're also using that on behalf of your clients. And so it's a place that we see ourselves uniquely fit to help you harness the value of technology, the value of data, and obviously take advantage of the change that's going to leave slow movers behind and let folks that are leaning in on this change unlock more and more value. And over the next probably 25 or so minutes, hopefully I will have covered for you a detailed review of where we see the market, where we see the opportunities, and the capabilities you need to put in place to unlock this exponential value growth. Our prediction time, right? In the near future, more and more agencies will start to develop consumer data layer assets. This is to drive clear differentiation in what services they can offer and also to match what we think is going to be a competitive table stakes over time. We'll speak a little bit more to this, but let's start with what is a consumer data layer, right? Consumer data layer is the way that you're going to work with your clients to understand who their best customers are, right? To understand their CRM data sets, to understand their site visitors, to understand their prospect lists, and that you're going to be able to integrate that as an agency with the unique information you have, both from ad exposure logs, from internal research, from other third-party data that you're leveraging to build out a true and rich view of a consumer. And how do you help your clients by matching, appending, and enriching data to those data assets so that you can make better decisions on how to deliver marketing, how to optimize creative, how to measure campaign success. We're going to talk through all those things in a little more detail as we go. The second major thing that agencies are going to be doing is you're going to be investing in AI solutions. I don't talk to any of our clients who aren't investing today in some AI solutions, right? Those may be self-directed work, leveraging Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini. It may be in partnership with vendors that are helping bring AI agents and solutions to an agency. It may be in homegrown solutions, right? But we're seeing an investment there. And it's generally been focused around how do you help improve workflow and how do you accelerate your time to value for your clients to create new sources of margin? Because the challenge is we all know that the FTE model that many of us live in is going to go away, right? If you're a SaaS company, the idea of user seats feels like it's under some pressure. If you're an agency, FTE markups feels like it's under some pressure. We want to make certain that and what we're seeing is investment in ways to do more from that. And the third piece is there's going to be more investment in talent. I think there's been a really overblown concern around workflow staff reduction due to AI, right? A little amorphous fear. If you go back and if you're a student of literature or you've spent a time in an English minor, you might say, hey, this fear we have around AI is the fear that we started having back when Frankenstein was written, right? The fear we had in Space 2001, right? And fear that we have in the Terminator movies, right? There's always fear. But what we actually think is the investment is going to be much like 25 years ago, we started talking about we needed to hire digital natives, people who understand how the internet worked. Now we're going to be hiring and investing in folks that understand how AI works and how AI works to create data-driven solutions that are going to power the growth of an agency, right? We're not going to see a reduction in talent. We're going to see the goals of our talent shifting, and it's going to probably change some of our hiring. It's going to change how we look to complete certain jobs and functions. But I think there's going to be an investment here, not just a reduction in talent. And so these are three key themes that we see across all of the clients we work with today. And we should get all up to date on hot takes as well, right? There was a period where LinkedIn was full of everyone, talking about why did Publicis spend $2.2 billion to buy LiveRamp, right? And there's been a lot of answers on that. I think eMarketer said, hey, it's its latest agentic AI bet. I think there's certainly some truth there, right? My hot take on Publicis LiveRamp is going to be it's about Publicis already owning a consumer data layer, right, inside of their Epsilon assets that they also spent $1 billion for. It's going to be about understanding that they need distribution and connectivity of those data assets to put them to work in media, in audience first planning, and in campaigns that are out knowing who the next best customer is. And they wanted to make certain they had the pipes to do that. And the third part is in a time of change like we're living in right now, in a time where software is often being described as everything is going to be rewritten in 6 months due to the benefits of whether it's Claude Code or something else. That momentum, it says, well, we need to understand and have a platform approach so that we can build at each step of the model, right? That we can understand what our endpoints are, that we have the ability to distribute it, right? And that's my take on where Publicis LiveRamp is that it's a bet that they will unlock more value through AI integration and services over time to help power their data assets. And if you're in the space right now, you know that there's certainly, some of the larger holding companies are changing their economic models. They're changing how they think about billing their clients. They certainly suffer from what I'll describe as business model debt. FTE contracts that run multiple years, they can't get rid of those, right? They suffer, from the challenge of internal process debt. How do they actually make this work in a new AI-driven world when they've got all these steps in their standard workflows? But what they're not seeing is as much tech debt. And what we see ourselves at Resonate and kind of thinking about how we're going to build technology and how we're going to continue to be at the forefront of it, we're not as worried about the tech debt we are right now as making sure our processes and our business models are evolving with what's now technologically capable for us to bring to the market. Really exciting time. Certainly, $2.2 billion isn't what all of us have to go spend to buy an asset, but that's my hot take here. And, speaking of kind of places where it's been hot, all of us aren't at Cannes right now. We're not in the south of France baking, but we can still read the headlines, right? And what we're going to see in the headlines is there's not an AI maybe at Cannes. It's all about AI, right? WPP is going to announce buyer agents and new standards for initiatives around how they're going to help manage their process debt, right? Publicis is going to call out AI hype, right? And bad pitch practices here in France. Right? At the same time, Reddit's going to announce AI-powered advertising and shopping tools. And Meta is going to talk about expanding AI advertising tools. So a little bit of there's certainly hype, but there's also a lot of work and effort going into building an AI-powered future for marketing, right? There is no AI maybe, right? It is going to happen. The change is here. We're spending time working through the change. We're all thinking about how are we going to leverage it and use it, but it's here and it's definitely not going to stop as we go through this. And OpenAI came out and said, well, we're clearly in the advertising business now. So not only are we all going to be using AI, but the AI companies are in the advertising business, right? Pretty significant change in how we might think about what are we going to do with AI and how is AI going to become an advertising channel for us, even as it's the backbone of how we're building, technology change, how we're building process change in our organizations. So delightful time for all of us to go figure this out, and hopefully we'll shed some points of guidance for everybody here. By the way, why is OpenAI in the change market right now? Why are they in the advertising market? I mean, why is that as something that they're now really leaning into, right? Part of that is because as we think about how much spending could go to global AI search, right? Forecast here says it could happen in 6 years to get to $100 billion, right? If you compare that, the next closest rocket ship was really the retail media business, driven largely by Amazon, but certainly by other participants. That took about 9 years, let's say, almost 10 to get to 100 billion globally, right? Social took 13-ish, right? And some other businesses haven't even gotten there yet, right? Despite having attention metrics and great pieces, there's obviously going to be a movement towards budgets are going to shift where attention shifts. And if we have hundreds of millions of monthly active users of ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and Service XYZ, well, that's where the eyeballs are. That's where the attention is. The dollars are going to shortly follow. And unlike maybe historical pure technology companies, the AI companies are going to be in advertising, right? And that's the only way they're going to be able to sustain token prices after some of the venture money starts to shift. And we're all going to carry the bill on that. Advertising will help fund that, right? So a very common model, but one we think is going to be very, very fast. When we think about where the market is and where everybody on this phone is and our 200 plus agency clients, what I think about is everyone's one of three things. The first thing there is maybe they're a chef, right? And maybe even they're a Swedish chef because it's World Cup time. And they're excited about owning the end-to-end baking process of developing solutions for their clients. Some folks are going to want the best cake mix hack. They know there's an awesome opportunity to start with some pre-built ingredients and then to add something special, perhaps it's the frosting, to create the most amazing product for their clients to use and to partner with. And then the third one are the folks that are like, listen, I need the solution in a box based on where I'm at today, based on my resources and my capabilities, and I will happily bring that to my clients and sell that and generate value because I see the value in having this cake in front of me, and my clients see the value, but I can't build it myself. And so I'm going to partner to do this. This is also a somewhat silly analogy for us to think about where are you on a maturity curve? right? How do you view your agency today in its ability to say, in an AI and data-driven world, am I a chef? Am I hacking a cake mix, or am I buying out of the box, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with being any one of these three. I think all of us are going to be one of these three at different times, and we're going to move through, right? And it may on different products and different solutions. You're going to invest more or less in one or two of these. But there's definitely an opportunity for us to use this as a way to think about where you're going to be, and it's often going to be tethered to what are the requirements to lean in on the opportunity in front of us through this new AI and data-driven solution sets. I spoke about this a little bit back with when we talked about Publicis, but holdcos are setting the playing field for us all when you think about the investments they've made over the years, right? And you think about those investments, and we've done this as a way to think about what they're investing in, what the market's looking for, right? There are consumer data layer solutions, right? Whether it's Choreograph at WPP, now part of their WP Open solutions, whether it's the Omni solutions and data sets they've licensed, and now with their acquisition of IPG, the Axiom data sets as part of that overall Omni consumer data layer, whether it's Publicis with their acquisition of Epsilon and all of Epsilon's data assets, Horizon and their partnership with TransUnion, right? There's a consumer data layer product that's happening out in the market today, right? There's identity and matching, critical to be able to leverage your data sets, your clients' data sets, to bring them together, to unify them and enrich them. Super important. There's orchestration platforms, right? These are solutions that help move data around. They help people do specific work around building the best audiences, running the analysis, generating the reporting, right? Solutions that exist to make that easier, that are part of everything from new business strategy through how do you optimize a media campaign when it's running to how do you integrate CRM data and create a report for your clients. There's data marketplaces being built, right? No longer are the clients of these shops buying just through the LiveRamp marketplace from kind of standard third-party vendors, but they're buying proprietary data assets from their partners, right? Data assets that have principal revenue approaches in them, data assets that create margin, right? Because they are ultimately investing on the consumer data layer, the matching, and they're making the recommendations. So where data is not just overhead or a pass through on working media to a third party, it's actually core to what these companies are selling to their clients to drive smarter and better advertising. And so that's now a new source of revenue and margin that is becoming, as fees are changing, as structures are changing, becoming a margin that obviously we continue to see investment in by the holdcos. We think that is moving, and we're moving that capability and that margin approach downstream to, the clients we service, and we think it's a big trend in the overall industry. And then the last thing is they're also talking about building agentic engines, right? They're talking about building solutions that are going to help power what they do and how they do it. And whether it's going to be homegrown tools, whether it's going to be a mix of licensed tools, and tools yet to be built, right? These are going to be the backbone of how they talk about how they're doing more with the same number of people, how they're expanding and accelerating and driving additional value is because they're leaning in on agentic engines that are powered by this unique data and powered by these orchestration platforms for their teams to access and use. And it's all creating the value exchange of we're going to be better at our jobs through AI. We're going to reduce our cost of services to our clients as part of this. We're going to improve our margins because we're going to do more with the same number of people, or in some cases less, and we're going to build a business that way, right? This is what we're looking at as the competitive environment, because as you do more and more of this optimization work, these clients start thinking about these companies start thinking about how do they go down market? How do they change who their target market is if they can support more and more clients without having to staff up more people, without having to be worried about the economics of their prior FTE models? As you start seeing more and more of that delivered through agentic solutions, you're going to see more and more of those clients start looking at how can we expand our pursuit of revenue and pursuit of accounts that we might not have worked on before, right? So what's going to be required for everyone to win the future, right? It is this idea of being an outcome agency. And an outcome agency is going to start with proprietary data layers, right? Products that you build because you have access to your clients' data, to your own data, to partner data, to create something that's unique and that is sold as a product, right? It's not sold simply as a service or an overhead. It's sold as a product the client is opting in to buy, right? We're going to see amplified marketing experts, right? We're going to put technology and tools in the hands of people who are subject matter experts on how to be a great marketer and let them lean in on what can they do with these tools. How can they better service their clients? How can they better create value for their companies by being experts and but being amplified through the use of new and emerging technology, where AI is a big part of that for sure. And then the third one is, you know, efficient outcomes, right? Efficient for the business to go after those outcomes, whether it's in creative development opportunities and being able to rapidly scale new and more creative, to being able to support analysis on more and more channels and endpoints to look to drive better and exponential results. Excuse me. The goal for agentic workflows is to say, how do we do this across our ecosystem that we work with as an agency to make it easier, faster, and cheaper for us to do this work? And as we see this piece, this is where we're seeing then obviously the investment dollars, right? But there are requirements to this, right? And this is where I talked about this as a maturity curve, heuristic for us all is like the idea that if you're going to be a chef, you have to have leaned in on some really important pieces. You have to have leaned in on the idea that I have engineering assets that speak cloud, that understand the DCR, data clean room, three-letter acronym, right? They know how to move data around both internally and with our clients, right? We've got to have data product teams that understand how we're going to build, create a product and a go-to-market strategy around for the data that we're getting access to, right? You're going to need data solutions SMEs that can talk about how do you use a consumer data layer to drive success for a client? Why is access to their first-party data so important? Why is proprietary data so important, right? Part of the answer is so it's not just AI slop coming out of Claude, and anybody can get that same answer. It's people who can talk about the solutions of collecting and integrating data are going to be super important, right? And then you're going to have product sales folks, right? As an agency is now going to have to sell products. You're not just doing this for free or as overhead as part of the working media. This is about products that you're creating margin and revenue on. And so you're going to need to make sure that your team can sell the products you're building inside of this model. Now, that holds true for all three of these classes, right? But it gets to, maybe there's only a partial investment needed here, right? If you're buying the cake box, you probably just need a limited amount of engineering and cloud and data clean room resources. Your partners are going to help you there. That's why you're working and buying the out-of-the-box solution, right? You might not need a full data product team, right? If you're doing the cake mix, you probably already have some of that, right? You already know that you're there to add something special to the assets and the partners you already work with, but you're still going to need some investment here. So when we think about this, the way we look to have these conversations, the way I think the market's having these conversations today is there's a need to understand where you're at and where you want to be in the next 6 months. Because everything you're leveraging today is only going to get better over the next 6 months. It might be totally rebuilt, but it's going to get better, right? The agentic workflows, the ability to move data around, the ability to leverage these tools is iterating so fast that, I think everyone in an engineering shop knows that what they're doing today might be state of the art, but it will be a standard drop-down widget inside of, Claude, Cowork, or Code in the next 6 months, right? So the cool thing you build today is likely to be table stakes in the future. And so the value starts to come in from, well, what am I feeding into these engines that are helping us redesign how we do our work, right? And that comes back to proprietary data assets. Why you have to have data is going to be the key to everything. If we thought about a super simplified agency stack, and I stress this is super simplified, is there's a handful of functions, right, for a shop that's full service or focused on media. And those functions start with strategy and research, right, oftentimes done through third-party platforms or in-house. There's media planning solutions, right, that come out of research tools or their DSP, SSP, media partners, right? There's the actual media services delivery, right, which is always done through partners around demand-side platforms, supply-side platforms, dynamic creative optimization or any other third-letter acronym we want to put in there. Our industry loves them. And then there's optimization and measurement, which is most often done through reporting through our media planning tools and our media buying tools and conversion APIs from our partners, right? We get to get some data on this, right? And underpinning this is this idea of, well, what's our audience strategy, right? How are we bringing in a view of the consumer to these services we have, right? And those things require data products, client first-party data. They require the use of data clean rooms, and especially certainly with clients that have high compliance or regulatory environments, clean rooms are a necessity. And you've got to be able to work through Snowflake or InfoSum or other companies to do that. And then you've got distribution requirements, right? How do you move data from your internal analytics environment to put it into action, right? How do you make certain it's available to be targeted for ads to be delivered, for the audience strategy to be enacted? Um, this is what everyone's shooting for at some level today, right? And I think a lot of our clients today are thinking about what are they building inside of this analytics environment, right? And that's really where it's what are they building, what are they enhancing, and what are they buying to help deliver that service. It's not going to look like this though, right? It's not just going to be AI agents over AI agents over AI agents doing everything. Um, the human's still going to be exceptionally involved in this, both for validation and trust, also because, a robot shouldn't make all of your decisions. And code shouldn't have all of the authority to go spend client money, to go validate results, to ensure compliance. They're tools to help us do that, right? So we're still going to have our teams and our people leaning in to be the subject matter experts that are going to be able to work faster and smarter and do so much more in the same amount of time because of AI agents. But when I see folks get a little hyperbolic on, we're going to have agents doing everything, the answer is probably not, right? It's just too a bridge too far. They're going to do a lot, and there will be creep on the thing. More and more things we let them do as we validate that the agents are governed properly, that they are in compliance, that we understand the bias, that we know what kind of decisions they're going to make. But today we're not there. And so we have to constantly think about the teams that are going to enact these services and solutions being supported by agentic technologies and partners and vendors that are helping us build these solutions. So overall inside of this, I'm going to walk you now through what we think is the better way, right? That we think there's a way to be leaning in on this set of change in the industry to drive that exponential results for yourself and for your clients. Let me walk to you about what the next steps are. So when we start this process, right, I'm going to start with the idea that you have to have a belief and identify your consumer data layer vision, right? What I mean by that is if you're an agency that said it's really hard to get my clients to share my first party data with me, it's really hard to get access to their CRM files. It's really hard to understand, who's purchasing online on their website versus offline in their stores. I don't really understand how to get the intersection of who those customers are and how they can help drive results. And maybe some of that's because the campaign's fully run through Meta and you're letting Meta do all the optimization. But if you do that and you extrapolate that concept a few years forward, not a lot of value there if Meta is going to continue to invest in tools that make this easier and easier to do turnkey, right? There's not a lot of differentiation if you don't have access to client first party data and if you can't leverage your own data. Every agency sits on massive amounts of data from ad exposure events to third-party data assets that they have to performance data that they share with their clients. How do you bring that data together, bid strategies, information that only you have, and integrate it with how you've been able to reach the right customer for your clients? That's part of your consumer data layer vision. We need to lean in on that to say, I know where I can add the most value, and I know how it will help me not just on understanding who the best customer is, but understanding how it's going to help me identify that customer, target that customer, build predictive models of who the next customer is, measure and optimize the results across platforms and partners to make sure I'm getting it, and discover the folks that maybe I didn't know were the best customer, but now I can start to learn it. The way you're going to do that is you got to invest in the people and empower the people to launch it. You've got to have the right teams. If you lean in on this from a vision, but you don't actually have the staff that can deliver it, it's not going to work, right? And you can't outsource a core differentiated service inside of your business just to your vendors. You've got to have people who are going to be hands-on keyboard or hands-on agents managing this to allow them to launch a vision, which means thinking about the go-to-market, thinking about the teams, thinking about the capabilities. One of the things we've learned over the last few years is that there's a lot of sales enablement that we work with our clients on because this is new. This isn't just managing to FTEs. It's not just managing to the KPIs of the budget. It's actually leaning in and saying, we're going to help our clients do something a little different. And we think by doing it this way, we're going to be able to drive outsized results for them, and we're going to be able to improve our margins internally, right? And the third piece is, while you need your own people, you need to partner appropriately on the maturity curve. Today, and I think for the last couple of years, everybody spent a lot of money, whether it was inside of ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, thinking about what they could do, trying things, opening it up to their entire staff to say, hey, let's go figure out how we're going to use AI to build our business. Let's figure out what we can do differently with AI. A lot of those initiatives, of course, failed, right? They were test initiatives. They were maybe a little unstructured, right? There was optimism on what our AI overlords could ultimately do for us, right? So we have to understand that like you're not going to build it all yourself. And there has to be partners who are going to help you navigate from where you are today to where you need to be on ultimately deciding, are you buying a cake box? Are you enriching the mix? Or are you going to go and start from scratch and build it yourself, right? Those are three important things. And I strongly encourage everyone to lean in on saying, before you even think about two and three as it relates to consumer data vision and data products, do you know where you want to create value? Do you know which of your clients you can create that value for? Do you know how it might change your business model to lean in on this vision? Because this is what we see is coming, right? That if you don't have solutions, the holdcos have already set the playing field for you. You've got to be leaning in on how are you going to get there yourself. So let me think about a sample workflow for everyone here. Let's take the idea that a client's got first party data. It tells you everyone who bought in the last 90 days, right? It tells you their historic values, right? They've got their own existing segmentation on it, right? That should be fed into your consumer data layer. You should use that. You should identify those folks and mix and match and enrich them with data you have that you've acquired, right? Whether that's partner data like Resonates, whether that's data from another partner, whether that's ad exposure logs. That data is then fed into your products, right? Your audience intelligence products, your media planning products, right? Your media execution products, your measurement products, services that you've generally treated as something we do to now being a product-based approach. We're going to use your data to come up with these answers for you, right? It defines your activation strategies. It tells you who the right audience it is. It lets you build accurate models and do better segmentation. And it lets you distribute those audiences so you know who you're going to reach them to. So that at the end of the day, you're not just asking your partners, use your AI to run this campaign for me. You're saying, I know something about what matters to my client. I'm adding value from the dollar that's going to be spent on Meta or Trade Desk, and they have great optimization technology. But I want to start them with even more information. I want to make sure that I'm creating value at time zero of who they're reaching, why they're reaching them. How do we go and give them a better seed list or a better lookalikeness of the total addressable market so that as an agency and as a partner, you're driving more value for your clients. And when you get your conversion APIs, when you get your back-end data sets, you can better say, we knew who they were trying to target. We knew why they were targeting them. We didn't just get back generic age, gender, income data, but we understood the nuances, the psychographics, the details of these individuals for why they were your right customer client. And that's why our results are standing up. Meta's doing a great job, but without us, you wouldn't know any of this stuff because that's not data they share. That's not the services they offer in helping you understand the future state. And that's where we want to lean in on is what does that future state look like when you have a workflow that starts with the idea of powering a consumer data layer and then enabling that layer through existing capabilities, technology, AI-based new solutions that are coming all the way end to end from prior results to new campaign hypotheses that you want to go test to activation and measurement. When Resonate thinks about this, I'm just going to flip this on its side a little bit and share that our approach is that the consumer data layer represents, and I'll get a little more detailed here, the idea that clients are going to have levels of data. They're going to have levels of things they're willing to share. And you've got to have a flexible model to support that, right? Not every client's going to want to have name and address in today's kind of data safety, privacy centric worldview rolling around. So they're going to use pseudonymous IDs. They're going to use things like hashed email, mobile ad IDs, residential IP addresses, zip 11s, right? And they're going to have other identifiers that they want to use to say, yes, I'm happy to share this data to drive better results. Can you support receiving this data in a way that doesn't put my data at risk, my customer files at risk, subject me to more compliance and oversight issues, right? At the same time, most agencies are going to be sitting on data today that is generally anonymous to any other further characterization data, right? It's ad logs, it's who did they reach, who clicked on a thing, but they're all ID tokens. They're not people yet. They don't have enrichment associated to them. So our predictive consumer intelligence products bring those 2 points together. They let you create a unified view online, offline, across channels using multiple IDs to understand who the best customer is, who's the customer you reached, who's that new customer that seems to be having a high conversion rate or a high bounce rate, right? And how do I, build better models to understand and optimize every dollar I'm spending on behalf of my clients, right? How do I drive more performance through this? But it starts with, building an agency analytics environment that launches these agency products, right? Solutions around insights baselined on data that's available across all, the agency and the client, right? So there's a unified ground truth. Building segments, building models, right? It's the ability to upload audiences and move them around the industry, right? The ability to do direct media activation, to make certain that you're not just building insights that sit in a PowerPoint, right? You're not just building insights that come out of a cloud output, but you're building insights that become an activatable asset that then taps into ways to generate increased revenue and money because you can actually use that as part of your service package. It's a product the client buys, and it has principal data value for you to mark that up and sell that to clients, right? Which is the exact same thing all the holdcos are doing around driving media activation against proprietary audiences they're building using their own data, the agency data, client data, and enriching that and creating outcomes for their clients, right? And you're going to need clean remeasurement solutions, right? This is how you ultimately get data back from the walled gardens, right? They're not going to give you a name and address. They're not going to tell you explicitly who they reach, but they're going to give you coverage and overlap data sets. They're going to even, and that, measurement, I think, is changing. There's more and more demands on clients and partners to share more, but you're going to need to be able to do that with a unified ID graph that can work across all partners. And so you have to have a solution that does this. So what we've looked at is saying this becomes the baseline of how any agency is going to talk to clients about driving value and understanding the consumer. And if you don't understand the consumer, then you're just outsourcing all of the optimization and all of the value creation to your media partners who do understand the consumer and are using that to drive a portfolio strategy, but not necessarily going to share any of that data with you as an agency to get smarter, better, and develop new and unique opportunities in terms of products and solutions. So we believe that our solution and our focus has been with the independent agencies. We level the playing field, right? We have atomic level consumer data that exists at 250 million US profiles, 18 plus. We have hundreds of millions of identity graph items to let you build out the right view of hashed emails, mobile ad IDs, and IP addresses to understand who these consumers are and match them to your client files, right? We have our orchestration platform. Our Ignite platform democratizes access across your teams. It's one of the easiest to use platforms to generally to build audiences, to create insights, to generate reporting suites. All can be white labeled and personalized for our clients. We have our agentic engine Cortex, which we launched earlier this year in April. Cortex is a set of agents that drives and to automate and autonomously improve results across your media campaign development, everything from audience creation to sub-segmentation to delivery to your media partners. And we've launched and leaned in heavily with our clients on agency marketplaces. How do you drive revenue solutions to clients by building proprietary assets that aren't just assembling commodity third-party data that you're trying to mark up, but represent the work done here from the data layer to the matching to building the audiences and segments themselves that then become a recommendation to the client to invest there. And that becomes, kind of the comparative value on what you see from an Omnicom, what you see from a Horizon, is the ability to tell this story. And these are the services that we make available to our clients. And we've always leaned on this from a three-phased approach. Every agency has a consumer strategy group. They have a way to think about the consumer. It may have historically always been done off of Google searches and eMarketer reports and other third-party data sets. Now it's being done a lot through the ChatGPT tools, right? But it has to have a strong baseline and it has to be something that's extensible into activation, right? How do you build smarter and better targeted solutions to reach the right consumers? And then it goes into, okay, how do we ultimately grow to where we're generating all of this information ourselves in phase three, right? That we've got the data science and the analytics teams running to build products to help us create value for our clients because it's an integrated client and consumer data layer that opens up the door for really differentiated results that can help explain all of the things that are happening behind the curtain at a walled garden, or all the things that can happen in terms of how do you optimize to and do audience discovery and extension. So this is how we want to service the agency marketplace to drive growth. What we found is that, it has to start with data, and the data has to perform in real world testing. So our approach has been We want to make certain that our clients drive performance in Meta, right? And then we have a 30% improvement in recruiting performances here. We have improved conversion rates across original audiences that were based on client CRM when we build our predictive lookalikes, right? We can drive a 50% better return on ad spend in Meta audiences. When I say we, I mean we together, right? We have phenomenal data. We can let you put it to work to drive these types of results for your clients. And our goal is to make certain that you're doing this as a proprietary product you're building. You're not just buying our data off the shelf. You're building unique assets and monetizing those. We do this across three product levels. So our agency ignition product, which is our revenue-based solution that allows you to have end-to-end AI-powered workflows. It fully integrates into your current agency system. I think of this really as your marketing OS that leans in on how do you drive value on the work you do today by adding both AI levels of efficiency to that work and unique proprietary data with a business model that helps you move away from just FTEs to product-based approaches. We offer a consumer data layer through our predictive consumer intelligence product, full identification of consumers across pseudonymous IDs, high match rates to make certain that as your clients give you data, you can create the most value from that. And it's baselined on our 250 million consumer profiles and our 15,000 unique atomic attributes we associate to those profiles, right? Turnkey deployment available through cloud-based services and direct file installs. And the last one is our data marketplace, right? Helping you create the model for how you're going to tell clients, we're building something unique for you. We're going to recommend that. And there's a margin approach for our agency clients to launch that, which again is what is happening every single day at the holdco level. And the larger independents are all leaning in on this model because they know the pressure on service fees is coming. They know the pricing pressure on FTEs is coming. And so they need to create alternate revenue strategies and channels. And certainly being part of the working media flow, where it's not an incremental cost, but it's a way to do better targeting and drive better results, as opposed to buying something commodity off the shelf that you guys don't drive any value on, is what we see a massive movement towards. And one thing I'll say, it's political season. We're just ended up a round of primaries. Resonate will help you build not only political understanding, but just think of this as a way to say we've accurately predicted the last three presidential elections. We've predicted it accurately at state levels. We understand what makes consumers tick inside of our massive view of the US consumer population. The data we have works just as well to differentiate between a Colombia shopper and a Patagonia shopper as it does between differentiating between a Republican voter and a Democrat voter versus an independent voter, right? Massive nuance in our data. We're happy to obviously walk everyone through our complete data capabilities, but you have to have a strong data set to get started. And you don't want to just have a legacy data set. You need something that's going to actually give you scale and prediction on who your next best customer is going to be for your clients. And this also works across, launching things like sparkling water. We helped our agency partner grow the category growth by 4x for Waterloo in less than a year, right? And it's because we understood the consumers that were going to be leaning in and wanted a challenger brand, wanted a new approach, and really help them drive unique outcomes on understanding the consumer more effectively. So in closing, I'll say, let's work together. I've got two quick slides to let you take a look at as we dive into both the ability to scan and learn more about Resonate's predictive consumer intelligence products, how we help you build a proprietary consumer intelligence layer, how you get a unified view across all of the adult US population to power smarter marketing, better measurement, and increased insights and capabilities for clients. And ultimately, how we can work with you to both, obviously, from new business all the way through media execution and measurement. So you can take a second and scan that QR code if you'd like to learn more about our predictive consumer intelligence install product. Then our last piece is really to talk about our Resonate Marketing OS. So we want to power how your agency and how we can work with you and tap into the existing capabilities you have. So certainly feel free to scan this QR code as well. We're delighted to work with you on how we can help understand where you sit. Is your goal to be a baker? Are you going to be chef, Swedish chef here? Or are you looking for a cake box or something in between? But we'd be delighted to talk about how our AI agent-based solutions and our existing proprietary data assets and technology can help drive outsized results for your agency as well. So with that, I will ask our team if we have any questions, And whether we have time, I know I ran a little bit long, so thank you for sticking around. And if we don't have time, we'll move forward to follow up independently on any questions that we have today. And with that, I think we're going to actually, because we did run a little long, we're going to follow up with the folks who asked questions. Thank you for those as a direct follow-up. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time today and the opportunity to share our view on what's coming and how you should set up your business for 2027.